From a young age, I was told that I was gifted in English. Growing up in Seoul with non-English speaking, native Korean parents, my teachers would comment that it was impressive how I developed the ability to speak another language so proficiently. It earned me attention, pride, and awards. The achievement, the praise, it all felt so great that I continued to seek it by participating in whatever contest or competition that would prove my skill, feed my ego, and continually impress the people around me. Fast forward to high school, I began to consider my linguistic ability in English as something that defines me. This talk is not meant to brag, rather quite the opposite, as it is an honest assessment of my own need to reframe the way I see myself. Upon arrival, I quickly became known as the new girl who speaks really good English. Although I hadn't even said much out loud, my reputation preceded me. I secretly enjoyed the fact that I was already known for my talent so early in the year. I realized that a week into freshman year of high school, I had an expectation to meet. I was so sure that I would be able to excel in every subject because they were all instructed in English. Yet, as time progressed, success became more and more unreachable as standards continued to rise. At times, I felt like I may have overestimated my ability. Maybe I undertook too many challenging courses and co-curriculars. When I feel this way, it feels impossible for me to perform perfectly in all areas. This had a severe impact on my mental health and self-concept, that I began to pore over my performance, inducing anxiety attacks before every small quiz for a subject that I wasn't confident about. It was an enormous amount of stress and pressure to will upon myself. I refused to accept that I was falling behind using skills that defined me for so many years and wondered what had changed. When I wasn't feeling validated through my grades, I lost motivation and couldn't find the confidence to reassure myself. When someone, a family member, a friend, a teacher, didn't remind me that it was okay to make mistakes, I'd suffer from an emotional collapse beyond disastrous. It didn't feel to me that I was capable of self-determination. I couldn't bring myself to make my own choices or manage my own life. My self-worth would plummet as I realized that I was in constant need of someone else telling me that I was worth more than a letter or a percentage scrawled on a piece of paper. It took time to realize that such emotional downfall was temporary yet consistent. It returned like clockwork every time a minor misstep occurred, threatening my precious GPA. I became unable to value myself beyond what others would remark, my own debilitating self-talk becoming a track played on repeat. Over-reliance on external validation has cast a devastating impact on my mental and emotional health. This has led me to explore the various causes and effects behind my dependence on words of affirmation, which seem to be increasingly impact modern teens. Humans all need affection and validation in order to feel appreciated by others and to ultimately appreciate ourselves. Receiving love has been proven to be one of humanity's most basic and fundamental needs by social science experts. A leading theory that unpacks the various ways we give and receive love has been proposed in 1992 by Dr. Gary Chapman, well-known marriage counselor and the author of The 5 Love Languages. In his book, Chapman dissects the various principles behind our expressions and needs of love. Chapman describes a love language as the way people with different personalities give and receive affection and validation. He further elaborates by learning to recognize these tendencies in oneself and in others, we can learn to identify roots of conflict, connect more profoundly with self and others, and develop greater bonds of intimacy. According to Chapman, there are 5 common love languages. He further elaborates that each love language emerges from the way a person would be wanted to be treated within a relationship, but also how they would treat another person, like a family member, a friend, or a partner. After reviewing Chapman's work, I was able to relate to several of these modes of validation. although as a self-proclaimed linguist, it became clear to me that words of affirmation have been indelibly shaping my sense of self. In fact, I argue that now, more than ever, it is being excessively relied on by teens of Generation Z due to the unique circumstances that we've grown up in. Affirmation can be positive, healthy, and reassuring, but over-reliance on external validation can become problematic. In such cases, we can become unable to self-validate without others telling us what we need to hear in order for us to feel satisfied with ourselves and our performance. Self-esteem, or the concept of our confidence in ourselves, our worth, and abilities, is a huge part of this. If self-worth starts to become determined by an external source, self-esteem fails to function. The fundamental benefit of maintaining a healthy self-esteem arises when we are able to give ourselves that love and confidence. So why is Generation Z so susceptible? Several studies show that teens of Generation Z seek immediate validation and acceptance through social media platforms, where we customize and curate different online persona meant to satisfy distinct audiences with distinct interests. With the common problems modern teens typically face, such as battling social norms and continual emotional crises, we turn to social media platforms as escape. We have grown up alongside fast-developing technological communication tools that allow us to disengage with their current reality, and we seek validation through such platforms that allow us to instantaneously connect with a wider network at the click of a button. Through such social media platforms, modern teens gauge the relative popularity of their photos and ideas through likes. These likes represent the popularity of the account owner that directly ties into the popularity of the content. On an openly public social media platform, we have the tendency to post a brighter, shinier, more ideal versions of ourselves. But this can adversely affect the way we see ourselves outside this false virtual reality. A study at UCLA sought to explore this phenomenon by surveying a group of modern teens who were prompted to react to their own Instagram photos while researchers observed brain activity. Findings show that the neurological activity in the social brain, as well as many other parts of the brain, are connected to visual stimuli and were activated when subjects saw a photo of themselves with more likes. An alternate sample was asked to react to the same exact photo, yet this time with fewer likes. But the teenagers' brains produced a more positive response towards the more popular sample. In other words, this means that teenage brain activity assumes a positive response from peer reaction or validation. These results show the significance of peer approval within teenagers' social media, which is a primary reason why we continue to post and post and post only the most flattering versions of ourselves online. For many teens, this can lead to addictive behavior and extreme dissatisfaction with the actual life in comparison to the glamorous alternative that has been artfully constructed online. Yet, despite how we seek such validation in a virtual community, it is easy for us to feel alone. Although I don't have a strong social media presence myself, Instagram is a platform I spend maybe 2 or 3 hours, even more, scrolling through daily, considering the near-perfect photos of celebrities and influencers, which ultimately leads to me feeling insecure about my own lifestyle. A 2021 CBC article explored 2 teenage girls and their experiences on social media, in particular, their engagement with Instagram. The girls stated that they would habitually edit their photos to feature smaller stomachs or wider teeth. Later, when these girls came across an altered photo a second time, they would completely forget that they had edited their photos and think, that doesn't look like me. This is a direct example of the distorted reflection modern teens create for themselves to earn validation online, yet it distorts their self-perception, which ultimately leads to lowering their self-esteem. The girls stated that they had adopted this behavior from unrealistic beauty standards, the fear of keeping up with their followers with their appearance, and over anything to gain likes. Such cases show how social media platforms like Instagram can become the very place where society's norms are distorted as unrealistic standards for perfection are showcased and reinforced. Clinical psychologist Janine Hubbard stated that every like a post receives produces a hit of dopamine. These reactions can lead to addictive behaviors and lead us to rely on this external source of validation as it is mentally and neurologically satisfying. Although it may be considered poor taste to comment something directly negative on someone else's post, the absence of a comment or like produces a similar effect on a teenager's social concept or perceived status. The few times I manage to stir up the confidence to post a photo of my face online, I find myself too repeatedly checking the number of comments and likes to determine my own status amongst my peers. Since adolescence is such a formative time, teenagers of Generation Z cannot fully understand that the realities depicted on the gram are illusory. Perfection is an illusion in itself. There is no truly perfect life, and the effects of social media can over-intensify the feelings of rejection and inadequacy in adolescence. Over-reliance on such external validation has shaped teens of Generation Z to drastically modify our behaviors. We crave words of affirmation and reassurance now more than ever as a means of feeling secure, important, and appreciated. I've noticed how such effects have taken a massive toll on my own mental health as I've transferred my need for validation through my grades to my online presence. Whenever I feel as if my grades aren't perfect enough, I find myself turning to social media to distract myself from the disappointment and to reassure myself that I'm still worthy. You might be thinking, so what? Teens should just switch off their devices and get it over with. But the fact is that it is not so simple, and it can lead to devastating impacts that may follow teens of Generation Z into their adulthood. Young people who fail to learn the importance of external emotional validation fail to learn emotional management. When emotional validation is not healthily given to us by the people around us, children and young adults can become predisposed to experiencing intensified or even abnormal emotions. That is to say, when emotional validation is not properly given to us at a young age, we can become maladapted. When we become over-reliant on external sources of validation, our self-concept, self-efficacy, and self-esteem suffer. When these traits are not taught and reinforced at a young age, when young minds are still forming, they become even more difficult to acquire in adulthood. So how can we approach this issue of teens' over-reliance on external sources of validation? First and foremost, we teens need to learn how to validate ourselves, starting from swiveling our focus away from meaningless, comparatively empty online encounters to focusing more on more in-depth interpersonal relationships offline. In order for us to establish a healthier cycle of self-validation, it is critical that we reconsider our habits surrounding social media engagement. If you need help managing this, there are apps that can be installed on your phones, tablets, computers that can tell you how many times you are on those devices. We've all heard this before, and you might learn the ways to navigate around these measures, but awareness is critical. Without it, we can find ourselves becoming over-reliant on our feed to feed our self-worth. Clinicians at Oregon Counseling have determined that the most effective place to start your journey of self-validation is to be honest with ourselves and accept ourselves for who we are, embracing both our feelings and our imperfections. To do this, we must learn to provide ourselves with an accurate reflection of our current state of mind. Accepting everything and rejecting nothing is at the heart of validation. Once you've identified and accepted your current state, try to refrain from ruminating on imperfection, as overthinking anything can over-intensify that feeling that can later lead to your reality. Know that it is okay to feel frustration, anger, guilt, inferiority, but it is also crucial to remember that no emotion is wrong or bad, and that feelings don't define us. For a feeling to be temporary and not a permanent state of being, we need to learn how to actively acknowledge these feelings and then learn to let them go. Teens who grow up thinking that their emotions define them fail to see beyond them. And if we fail to express such emotions overtly, if we see this as a sign of weakness, we compromise our ability to move past them. We need to flip this perspective and acknowledge our emotions for exactly what they are, however scary that might seem, and see this as a sign of strength. Allow yourselves to feel what you need to feel for an appropriate amount, and then will yourself to let it go. Validating yourselves is not easy, especially if we're not accustomed to it. If it were easy, everybody would know how to do it naturally. Many of us don't, and that's okay. Accepting yourselves as in progress is an important part of self-validation and personal growth. In the age of The Hobbit, The Avengers, and Harry Potter, it might help for you to imagine your journey towards self-validation as a quest. Seldom are results achieved instantaneously. It might take 3, 4, 7, or even more books, films, and a whole franchise for us to reach our goal. Yet it is critical for us to undertake this journey, as the more comfortable we become at validating ourselves, the better we become at reciprocating that validation in others. In the end, I would like to confess that I have learned to grow comfortable with my own process of self-validation. At times, I still feel like an anxious 16-year-old who can't seem to succeed. In these moments, I learn to remind myself that it is all part of a process and that it is okay. So this is what I'm working towards. If you've related to what I've talked about so far, if you recognize these hardships in your own story, you might want to consider what is within your power to shift and rewrite that narrative. And I recommend doing it offline. At the start of my talk, I mentioned I'd wondered what had changed. Turns out, a lot had changed about both myself and the world around me. As a child, I refused to accept and embrace these changes. But now, I have learned to embrace all parts of my experience, even those parts of me that aren't perfect. This is my first step that I've chosen to take in my quest for self-validation. Maybe yours will be different. Maybe our paths will intertwine, to diverge, only to cross again. What really matters is that we do what is within our power, everything we can, to make it to the other side. I hope to see you there. Thank you.